Kevin, it's been a few weeks, hasn't it? We chatted for the documentary
For Life in a Day, yeah.
"Life in a Day," and
Well, I
in
tend to
between
churn
all
out.
the.
I tend to do a new film like every 7 or 8 weeks. That's my schedule. Yeah.
Well, you did a great one. Um, this this film is just such an amazing piece. The story that it's based on, too, the true story that happened, is unbelievable. Could you
Mm.
take me through this a little bit as to how you got the project?
Well, Mohamedou Slahi wrote the book Guantanamo Diary when he was still in Guantanamo. He wrote it as letters to his lawyers, which is one of the things you see dramatized in the film, him writing his letters to his lawyers. And that book came out while he was still in prison. And I read it or read some of it in extracts in newspapers, and I was fascinated by it. I didn't think of making it into a film, but then Benedict Cumberbatch got in touch with me. He has a production company. He'd optioned the rights to the book. He was obsessed by it. And he said, "You want to make a movie?" And I, first of all, was like, a movie about the war on terrorism. We've seen a few of those. How do you do? And then he said, "Look, just talk to Mohamedou." So I got on a Skype call with Mohamedou, and he was so surprising. So not what I expected. He was warm, funny, talked to me about his love for The Big Lebowski, his favorite movie. And he was also, more than anything else, full of forgiveness. And he didn't have the resentment and anger that I really expected him to have. And so I came off that call thinking, I want to make a movie about this man, because this is the way that we can see the war on terror from the other side, from the side of somebody on the Muslim side who has suffered a great injustice here. And because he's such an appealing character, I felt like a Western audience would be able to relate to him. And that's obviously totally key to this movie working.
And you've got such wonderful moving parts in this. I mean, your cast is amazing. I've been a Jodie Foster fan ever since, we were both little, and she can do anything, but she's also a brilliant director. So is there a shorthand between directors?
No, it's kind of intimidating directing someone who's a director. I directed Ben Affleck once, and that's also, it's a little intimidating. He's a great director. But actually, I think both of them were able to separate their director self from their acting self. And I think in some ways they're quite relieved not to have to think about anything else, but just the one thing, the performance, But with Jodie, what she brought as someone who's been doing this for a long time and has done so many great performances and directed so many great films, what she brought is a real understanding of how much you need for a character to work for the audience. And she kept saying, I don't need that, Kevin. They're gonna understand who I am. They're gonna know who I am from just the way I do this or the way I do that. And I don't need backstory. So she pushed me to cut back on both her and Benedict's personal stories and to make them really just people who are doing their jobs. And so the focus emotionally goes on to the prisoner, Mohamedou.
Yeah, and brilliantly played by Tahar. Just knows this character. I mean, just walking in, and watching this film. By the way, the movie's available on Blu-ray and DVD, but if it's still playing in theaters, see it in a big theater, because his eyes say everything.
Yeah, he's a real movie star. There's so much complexity going on, so much ambiguity. You're not quite sure what to make of him. Is he guilty? Is he innocent? Who is who is this guy? What has happened to him? And it's a really hard sort of ambiguity to play, because you find yourself liking him, but not quite knowing if you can trust him. And Tahar pulls that off brilliantly. He was involved in this project from virtually day one, because we're old friends. And we worked together on a movie 10 years ago when he didn't really speak any English. And now his English is great. And as soon as I had that phone call with the real Mohamedou, I thought there's only one person who can play him. It's Tahar. And I really don't think there's anybody else who could have done this. I think we would have probably had to, throw in the towel if we didn't have him, because, he has that same warmth. He has that great chops as an actor. He looks kind of like a slightly better looking version of the real guy. So yeah, and he was committed to this in a way that, because it was a meaningful story for him, and he was on board for a couple of years before we actually made it. And he and I talked about it a lot. We worked on the script, we worked on the dialogue. So yeah, he was an integral part of it.
People who watch movies, as who aren't in the business, don't understand that you're also casting your crew, and you have a beautiful crew working on this. I mean, your DP is just amazing. There is a bit of noir to what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, he's a German Brit. He grew up in Germany. He came to film school here in Britain. Now he lives in LA. He's worked on a lot of interesting films: Danny Boyle's Sunshine, Steve Jobs, some Lynn Ramsey films, all sorts of things. And yeah, he brings a real kind of photographer's eye to it, and his use of color and shadow is beautiful. And I think, it was frightening for him, because you've got a lot of this is like people sitting in a room, sitting in a cell for long scenes. And how do you make that interesting? How do you keep it real, but also make it visually interesting and appealing? And what we discussed a lot was, a held back kind of visual approach, so that we in the first half of the movie, it's very, restrained, very restrained. And then we build and build and build into this big sort of cinematic sequence, which is all really about sound and image.
Yeah, how do you make Guantanamo Bay look pretty? And you just, in our final moments,
blue sky and orange jumpsuits. That's it.
Sure. It's beautiful. In our final moments we have together, what did you discover about all of this that you didn't previously know?
Well, I think I took away from it what I hope the audience will take away from it, which is that, these were human beings who went through this. And, America acted in the way that it did over Guantanamo and over the war on terror because Americans were frightened, and they were lashing out because they were frightened about, what had happened with 9/11 and thinking that could happen again. And these, there's these evil people out there. And we build our enemies up into being monsters. But actually, when you see them, when you spend time with them, they're human beings, and they're doing what they're doing, for reasons that we can understand, because we're all like them. And this, this man Mohamedou, who we made the film about, he was in prison for 15 and a half years, no charges brought against him. He's an innocent man. He was a victim of this, and I think that's a perspective that we need to tell. It's about time that we saw that perspective on this whole era of recent history.
That is a beautiful, beautiful film. And thank you so much. And again, as I always say, after all this is over, I'm going to take you out for either a shot or a cup of coffee somewhere in the world, Kevin. But again, congratulations, and keep them coming. You're in the right business. You tell stories and you do them so well.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Glad you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.